An update on the Kansas man who was wrongfully imprisoned for 23 years. His name is Lamonte McIntyre, and he was in prison for 23 years. He was recently in October exonerated on double murder charges. He sat down with CBS, and two things kind of really came to light about this. One, just the facts of his trial, which at his trial in 1994, when he was 17, there was no physical evidence or motive presented. Worse, and this is kind of what is crystallizing now, according to McIntyre's current lawyers, lead police detective Roger Golubski built the case by threatening witnesses. There are about a dozen people behind bars whose cases are connected to Detective Golubski, and a senior member of the Kentucky Bureau of Investigation announced that he is going to look into those past behaviors and is launching a more formal inquiry. So that's one part about it. And the idea that there are multiple people who are still sitting behind bars who might be suffering the exact same fate that Lamonte suffered for 23 years. The other aspect of it is that he lives in Kansas. And Kansas is one of the few states in America that does not compensate you if it is found that you were wrongfully imprisoned. According to the Innocence Project, the federal government, the District of Columbia, and 32 states have compensation statutes of some form. The following 18 states do not, and then they list them: Alaska, Arizona. You can see if your state falls into that category below, but that is about, it's almost that's almost 20% of the states actually, so it's not that small of a number. No, wait, that's 40% almost? Jeez, that's a lot of states.
Yeah, so he was in prison for longer than he was out of prison. So he put him in prison when he was 17, he serves 23 years. Now he's 41, finally gets out. First, let's just rewind and talk about how miserable the case against him was. And you see this stuff, and it is amazing that people get life sentences. Sometimes they get the death penalty on the flimsiest evidence. He got 2 life sentences so somebody went and killed 2 guys that were sitting in a car, okay? So why did they think it was Lamonte McIntyre? Well, they had one witness that said, I think it's a guy from with the name Lamonte, okay? So, and they're like, and she points this Lamonte McIntyre out. Okay, well you say, all right, that's something, right? And then they get a second witness to back up the first witness, who it turns out later said, no, Golubski made me say that. He threatened me and forced me to say it. It isn't him. It isn't him, I made it up. And they're like, yeah, whatever, go ahead and stay in prison for 2 decades anyway, okay? In the trial, as Brett pointed out, no gun, no motive, no physical evidence. Turns out, Lamonte McIntyre doesn't even know these guys. And they presented no evidence that he knows these guys. So without knowing these guys, he just up and shot them for no reason at all. And one of the witnesses we know made up the story, so-called witnesses. And then there was, the police at the time could not present any evidence in the trial that they even bothered to look for evidence. That they bothered to look for the gun or a motive or physical evidence of any sort. On this, they gave him 2 life sentences. It's amazing what happens in America.
17. He's a 17-year-old.
And he was a 17-year-old, and of course, they waited till he was 18 and tried him as an adult so they can give him life sentences. So, and another amazing part of the story is, one of the guys who was shot was around the same age as Lamonte was. He was a young guy, right? And his mom joined Lamonte's mom in fighting for Lamonte's innocence and to get him out for these last 20 years. From the beginning, she's like, it's not him. It's definitely not him. Why are we putting him in prison? That doesn't help my son. That doesn't help justice. She refused to even go see her son's burial place until she got justice for Lamonte McIntyre, which is amazing. Which leads me to my other point. When you do gross injustices like this, you never get the actual guy. You never get the person who actually did the killings, who I would like to bring to justice. And it's out of laziness and corruption and all this stuff. So which then leads to, why did this took 8 years, and they wonderful people, wonderful work on it.
The Innocence Project, yeah.
Yeah, and a couple of different groups worked on this. And so why in the middle of the hearing back in October did the prosecutor come out and go, never mind, he's free to go, we changed our minds? I'll tell you why. Okay, So one of the charges was, as they were relitigating this basically to try to get him off, was that not only did the cop do something wrong, but that prosecutor Tara Moorhead, who's now a prosecutor in the US Attorney's Office in Kansas, had also done something wrong. And one of the things she did wrong was that she did not reveal what apparently was a romantic relationship with the judge in the case. And the judge in that case was J. Dexter Burdett, who was scheduled to testify, because he was forced to, in this case. And before he was gonna come out and testify, the prosecutor's like, never mind, you're free to go. Okay, off you go. Our bad, sorry, did we keep you in prison for 23 years? Didn't mean to do that. In other words, the judge was going to get embarrassed and never disclose the relationship he had with the prosecutor, and hence did not treat Lamonte McIntyre fairly. And by the way, I would like to have justice on that as well. And then on top of everything else, they're like, nope, sorry, not gonna give you a goddamn thing. We robbed you of your life and did it in the most grotesquely unfair way. Who cares, you get nothing.
To put in perspective the compensation that's kind of the standard, statutes, according to the Innocence Project, should include either a fixed sum or a range of recovery for each year spent in prison. President George W. Bush actually endorsed Congress's recommended amount of up to $50,000 per year, with an additional $50,000 for each year spent on death row. Adjusted for inflation, that's $63,000. Texas is even a more robust compensation framework, compensating wrongfully convicted $80,000 per year, and an annuity set at the same amount, and essentially compensating you for what was taken. Because if you are convicted of a crime you did commit, we take away your freedom. Well, if we take away your freedom, what do we give back when you get out? The only thing that you can really look for is money. And if he was imprisoned in Texas instead of Kansas, they would have given him $1.84 million for the time he spent behind bars. There's a weird way to look at it because it's like monetary compensation, but like it's something. It makes sense. You drink hot coffee that doesn't have a label on it, you get millions of dollars. If someone takes away your freedom for 23 years, I don't know.
Yeah, it's the least we can do. And so 1.84 million is a lot of money. I get it. But you and I didn't spend 23 years in prison. Would you trade your life from the age of 17 to the age of 41 for $1.84 million? As much money as that is, hell no. What, you just traded away your life? What's the point of the money?
And all his quotes are so positive. He's like, I'm not looking back, I'm looking forward. I don't want to be angry. I don't want any, I just want to be positive and look toward my future. And it's like, okay, I'm glad he's that way. I'm pissed off for him and I want some kind of justice.
If you want to get the whole Young Turks show every single day, become a member, tytnetwork.com/join. And once you do, you'll be saying,
I'm like a smart person.
Or you might say,
I think it's weird.
Or you might say,
oops.
No, that won't be that one. It won't be that one. It'll be great, trust me. tytnetwork.com/join.